Man, what a week we've had. As I said last week, today's message is about our priorities, our values as our church. We don't have enough time in one Sunday service to cover everything about our priorities or values, but I chose a couple of things I felt like was important to share. Um, One of our core values as a church is loving others. If you've been coming here for very long, you'll have heard this a lot, and it's woven through a lot of our messages and our themes. And it sounds easy at first because it's like, okay, check, I'm nice to some people. It's cool. I can do that. I think we all feel like we love somebody pretty well. But Jesus teaches us that it's a bit more than what we might think. And some people are easy to love. Let's be honest. When someone's nice to me, it's easy to love them back. If someone's nice to you, it's easy to be nice to them back. If you have great service at a restaurant, it's easy to tip that waitress nicely because you received great service at that meal. If you're doing something where you're contracting a service, maybe you've hired a contractor and they've done a great job. Well, it's easy to pay them at the end because you're happily paying them because they did a great service for you. It doesn't always go that way though, sometimes, but that's the way that we want it to go. That's the ideal. But it's easy to love people when they're being nice to you. It's easy to love people who are being nice. And I'm going to propose today that I think it's not as easy as we think because I think most people are not easy to love. I think most people are hard to love because, and here's the reason why, because we don't know most people. If you don't know what somebody's going through, if you don't know what their day's been like, then you don't have a filter that you're going to apply to maybe lend a little understanding to why they responded the way that they responded. And when someone goes through a hurt or a heartache or a tragedy, it's not as easy to show understanding if you don't even know them or don't even know what they're going through. I can't, even think of a better example to talk about this than what happened this week at Michigan State University. I think we were all shocked by it. I was shocked by it when I saw the news and I saw what was happening because it's not a long way off. It's not something happening in a place far away from here. It's not that far away. And all of us know somebody who was either there at the moment or someone who has gone there before, or if you're like me, a former student of there. And so when they tell about what's happening in the buildings, recollection comes up real fast that I've been there before. I know what that place looks like. I know what it feels like. And your level of understanding is at a whole different place when you can understand a little bit of what they're going through because you've been there. It's hard to believe that an unnamed man would walk into a place and do the unthinkable the way that it happened this week. And it's hard for me to understand because I would never do that. It's hard for me to get it. And I don't want to name his name on purpose. I want to say an unnamed man on purpose because I don't want to make him famous. I don't feel like there's any reason to do that. But he made a conscious decision that no man was ever intended to make to take another life. And it happened quickly at the snap of a finger. It was just like that. This unthinkable act makes some of us angry. It makes some of us sad and hurt, makes some of us afraid. And it just leaves some of us perplexed, just trying to understand how this could possibly happen. Because in society, we process whether something's right or wrong based on whether I would see myself possibly doing that or not doing that. That's the way society does it. If placed in their situation, would I have behaved the same way? It's the way a jury often will make a decision on a verdict in a case is, could I see myself, do I understand why they did what they did? Like, could I see myself doing that or not? And if I don't see myself doing that, then of course it's wrong. And that's how we conclude that. But this is why some people can do the unthinkable because they're not me and they're not you. It's all part of the human reasoning. And this is precisely why we need God. God doesn't reason. God doesn't sit in heaven deciding, well, you know, it's not like that at all. God simply is the definition of good. God does not condone or permit an act like this to take place. The act is chosen by a human exercising their free will, as horrible as it is. And with the act comes natural consequences. A person dies, people are hurt, and families go through unthinkable pain. I saw a lot of people this week say things like, my heart is in so much pain for you. I am so sorry. How could anyone do this? And these people are displaying an amazing ability that we all have, or we all can have as humans. It's the ability to actually feel someone else's pain as if you are actually there. And maybe you felt it before. Maybe someone close to you was going through something, and it was as if you were going through it too. There was like a feeling of pain and angst that you felt in the inside of you, turning your stomach at the moment. And it's an incredible thing. It's called empathy. And I recently came across a TED Talk. I like TED Talks. I like to kind of hear what different people have to say on subjects. And this TED Talk, this person, her name is Helen Reese, explained empathy really, really well. And so I want to watch this together, and then I'll come back to talk to us after we watch this.
Even before I became a psychiatrist, I have always been fascinated by human connection. What makes us connect with others, and what makes us disconnect? All of us at some point have been on a plane when we have just settled into our novel, we're listening to music, or getting our work done, when suddenly the air is pierced by the sound of a shrieking baby. Now, I have watched all kinds of reactions to this, from the very sympathetic look toward the parents, to people who look mildly annoyed or even frustrated, to others literally racing each other to the one empty seat at the front of the plane to get away from this noise. But on a recent trip to the West Coast, I saw the most amazing reaction of all. A little 3-year-old boy wiggled out of his seat, toddled over to that screaming baby, and offered him his own pacifier. Wow, I thought, now that little boy really heard and felt the baby's distress. And isn't that what all of us want? To be seen and heard, and to have our needs responded to. That's the essence of empathy. Now, back then, everyone thought that empathy was something that we were born with or without, and that we were kind of stuck with whether we were or we weren't. The area in our brainstem that's responsible for the fight and flight response is the same area where the nuclei for tone of voice and facial expression reside. This means that when we are emotionally activated, our tone of voice and our facial expressions change without our even trying. So this means that our emotions are constantly kind of leaking out for all to see. But some people's emotions are a little more concealed than others, but with careful looking, we can hear and see what these emotions are. Far more than the words that people say, hearing the whole person means understanding the context in which other people live. It also means keeping your curiosity open and not judging until you really understand where that person's coming from. Love and compassion are necessities, not luxuries. Without them, humanity will not survive. So how does this all work? We've all heard the expression, "I feel your pain." Now, for a moment, imagine you're in a parking lot and you've just seen someone's hand get slammed in a car door. Now, I've seen people flinch even though nothing's actually touched them, and most people will actually feel like something physical just by imagining it. Neuroscientists have done some amazing studies trying to map the substrate of empathy. In one study, 16 couples were recruited, and the women were put in head scanners while they received painful electric shocks to their hands. As you can see here, the area in green represents that the entire pain matrix lit up when they received the shocks. Later, they were told that their partners had just received the same similar shocks to their hands. And you see the area in red represents almost the entire pain matrix, just knowing that someone else is in pain. Our brains are working with shared neural circuits, shared neurons, and some mirror neurons so that we actually have an internal experience of what happens to others. So when we hear the expression, "I feel your pain," it's not just a figure of speech. We're made for this, and it happens not just with our loved ones. We are at a critical precipice with technology. Outsiders coming in and observing our society might guess that we have more intimate relationships with our smartphones than we do with our significant others. Cyberbullying is probably on the rise because it is much easier to inflict harm on people whose pain you never see. It is much harder to have a meaningful conversation if what you're used to is 140 character tweets. And how do you know whether to say, "Do you need for me to come over," if what you've just gotten is a text that says, "Lousy day," with an emoticon? As Jonathan Safran Foer said, when we accept diminished substitutes, we become diminished substitutes. So the good news about empathy is that when it declines, it can also be learned. Employers who want to have an engaged and productive workforce need to get tuned in to the people. Patients who don't feel cared about have longer recovery rates and poorer immune function. Students who are disengaged are more likely to drop out, and marriages without empathy are more likely to fail. So empathy matters in every corner of your life. We all need to see each other to bring out the full potential in others. Most people need to have their specialness reflected back in the eyes of others in order to see it themselves. Everyone in this audience has the power to do this. And when we empower others, we can collectively come together to bring our best selves to solve the world's biggest, smallest, and most vexing problems. That is the power of empathy.
Now that was actually about 11 minutes longer, but I edited it down to fit within today's message. If you're interested in watching more of that, you can look that up on YouTube and catch the whole thing if you like. But we're talking about empathy. Empathy is the ability to understand and actually feel the pain of another person. And this is important. God created that ability within us for a reason. It wasn't something that we stumbled upon. And God was like, "Oh, didn't know it could do that." It wasn't like that. God created it that way on purpose. And if you create something on purpose, it means we're supposed to use it. And it means it could do something incredible. Have you ever felt hopeless and felt like no one else could understand what you're going through, or just feeling like, I wish there was a way I could just get over this pain? Or maybe you've been on the other side of this and you felt hopeless because someone you know is going through a lot of pain and you don't know how you can help. It's like, I don't know what to do. I've tried everything. I don't know what to do. And I will tell you the answer, the key is empathy. Empathy is the key you need to solve a person's problems that's close to you or a person that you want to help. Without a key, you can't get into the house. Without a key, you can't get into that person and find out what's going on, because often they're too broken to get up and answer the door. So you need something to get through to that person. A person who shows up when you're feeling hurt and lost and not sure what to do, a person that shows up and wants to share and feel that pain with you, it's like a magic power. It's like it actually breaks down. I've experienced this where my wife just coming in and saying, "What's going on?" And then I start sharing and I start letting it out. And next thing you know, after a while, I feel a little lighter. I feel a little better because somebody says, I understand. I mean, it's not that they know how to fix it. They can't change it and make it go away by snapping their fingers, but just that they understand makes me feel a little bit better about it. And it somehow ministers to me in an incredible way that it wouldn't have done had they not taken the time to show empathy towards that person. Now, Jesus Christ showed compassion. And compassion is sympathy and concern for the sufferings or misfortunes of others. Compassion is a form of empathy, but compassion takes it a step further. Compassion says, I'm going to put into action and do something now. As a Christ follower, compassion is our superpower. It's what enables us to be a superhero in other people's lives. It's like anger is to the Hulk. Oh, that's a bad example. No, it's like spinach is to Popeye. How about that? Hopefully everybody caught that in the room. But Popeye would take some spinach and, go. Next thing he knows, he can do it all, and he can do incredible things because of that. That's what compassion is to us, is for Christians. I was talking with Joey and Tammy before service today, and they mentioned that they had gone to the Michigan basketball game last night, and they were sharing with me what they experienced and what happened in that place. And it's a perfect example of what I'm talking about today. It's when a place like that, the Michigan fans chose to show empathy towards the Michigan State fans and the teams. And the next thing you know, it's one place in unity as opposed to two rivalries who are battling out and whatever, like you'd usually see, because it's rivalry teams at its finest for sure. But they said last night was a completely different atmosphere. The two presidents of the university came out arm in arm together at the beginning to show solidarity and unity. What an incredible moment that doesn't normally happen. It took a tragedy. It took something that no one would ever ask to happen. But through that, somehow, something beautiful comes out. Something beautiful happens afterward. Without compassion, we will walk past that homeless person that might just need a meal. Without compassion, we'll keep working when it sounds like a coworker could be crying in the next cubicle. Without compassion, we'll tell our child, just stop crying, suck it up, when they fell down or hurt themselves. Without compassion, we won't understand why people of different skin don't just get over it. Without compassion, we won't care whether our neighbor has a personal relationship with Jesus Christ or not. We won't care what their eternity is going to be or not going to be. It won't matter to us without compassion. But with compassion, we will find that care. It's not something, so don't worry if you're kind of person that feels like, well, I don't really feel a lot of that stuff. No one's born with this. It's compassion. Empathy is something we can work on, something we can summon up on the inside. Because after all, do you know what the best evidence is to diagnose a Jesus Christ follower? It's compassion. It's how you know that person is a Jesus follower. Jesus said it this way. Jesus said it, by this everyone will know that you are my disciples if you love one another. He pointed that out to us saying, look, this is the proof. This is the way people are going to know. Because compassion is the motivator that puts love into action. Without it, I mean, come on, let's be honest. A lot of us we got stuff to do, places to go, things to get done. I got my list of what I got to do today. I got to be to work at this time. Then I got to go and stop and pick up the dry cleaning. Then I go, we got a list of what we got to do. It's easy to get stuck in a routine where the next thing you know, you're just driving home and forgetting about things. But what Jesus is suggesting is that we allow compassion to be a reminder. I love reminders. I use my reminders on my phone all the time. I'll put in there like, oh, I got to do something. I'll put that in my reminder. That way I'm going to tell it to remind me tomorrow at 8:00 and it's going to ding, ding. And I'll be like, oh yeah. Because without that, I'd have forgotten. So I have to purpose ahead of time to put a reminder into my schedule to interrupt my day. I want to be interrupted to remind me, no, you need to do this. This is important. And we have to do the same thing in our faith walk, in our faith journey, to grow as Christians. We have to set reminders for ourselves to, okay, in the morning, I want to get up and I want to start by reading a chapter, or I want to start by having some prayer time. I'm going to set a reminder. Set that reminder. And as I begin doing these things, I'm going to notice that the compassion begins to well up inside of me more and more every day. It's not a sudden thing. It takes time. People who come from two different towns are very unlikely to become friends. Or people from two different states, let's say, are very unlikely to become friends because of the physical distance. If you don't run into somebody, how can you make a friendship with them unless it's through some common hobby, work, or interest, or school, or something that puts you in the same place at the same time? But just like that, it requires something to bring us together. And the people that we do run into in life, then those are people that we have an opportunity to make a difference with. We can't make a difference for every single person on the planet, but the people that are within our life circle, they're the ones that we have an opportunity to make a difference in. And it's easy to connect with people who I identify with, people who are of the same, maybe we came from the same hometown, maybe we share the same ideas of politics or with religion, or it's because of we work at the same place, or we went to the same college. There's a lot of things that makes it easy, but if we don't make intentional effort, we won't go outside of that small circle of friends because of what makes it easy to connect to people. We need to make effort for it. So why did God, if you're like me, I ask these questions. Why did God create mankind with so many differences? I mean, think about it. How many different shades and colors of skin we have in this world right now? Why didn't he just make us all black? Why? He could have. And all the different languages, all the different dialects that even, it's a whole interesting thing to study as you see that people even will create different dialects of the same language living in different regions. Why did God create us with all these different differences of things when we could have just been the same? It would have been a whole lot easier for him, right? But God is creative, and God created lots of differences, male and female, different races. He did it the same reason he doesn't force us to like him or force us to obey him. He gave us the gift of free will. And within that free will is misery at times, and there's bliss at times. Empathy and compassion are both a choice. People are not born with it. It begins with a choice of my free will to try to get that person. Have you ever said to yourself, I just don't get them. I don't get that person. I don't get them. What is their deal? Why do they keep doing that? I don't get that. And there's a reason we don't get them. And the reason is we haven't tried hard enough to get to know them. Keep trying. Try befriending a person who is like the one that you don't get. If you think, well, I'm not going to try with that one, maybe I'll try with somebody who's kind of like that. Go ahead and do that. And you'll be amazed what it may open your eyes to understand more of. It's like walking a mile in their shoes. We've all heard that saying. Don't judge anyone until you walk a mile in their shoes. Jesus set the ultimate example for us to follow. The reason that you and I became a Jesus follower, a Christian, is because we saw something in Jesus and we said, I want to be like that. I want to be more like that. I don't want to be the opposite of that. I want to be more, so I'm going to begin studying. I'm going to begin following this person, Jesus Christ, so I can become more like him. And here is what Jesus has to say about how much you should try to get to know someone in Mark chapter 12. People of Israel, you have only one Lord and God. You must love him with all your heart, soul, mind, and strength. The second most important commandment says, love others as much as you love yourself. No other commandment is more important than these. Now, don't get hung up on the people of Israel and think, well, that's not me. I'm not of Israel. He's talking to everybody. He just using that address because that happens to be who's in the room at the moment. But Jesus is addressing everyone in this context, you and me today included. Love others as much as you love yourself. So a good question to ask yourself is, how well do I take care of myself? How well do I love myself? And I know there's a lot of quick cliche answers that we'll throw out there. Well, I don't take very good, look at me. I don't take very good care of myself. I don't love myself enough. People might say, man, I'm missing a lot of things, but self-care is very important. And if we're honest, let's be honest, we treat ourselves pretty good. Think about it. I give myself exactly what I want when I want it, unless I'm on a specific diet for a period of time. But I break that diet sometimes for this reason. Because if I crave a taco, if I want a taco, I'm going to get a taco. It may not be right then. It may be later that night or maybe the next day, but I feel like tacos. So we're going to have tacos soon. I make that happen because I want that. Or if I want a new pair of shoes, I'm going to eventually go out and get myself a pair of shoes because that's what I want. And Jesus is telling us to prioritize loving others as much as we prioritize stuff like that. Like, Jesus is basically saying, hey, as much as you're going to make sure that you get the tacos or the cheeseburger or whatever it is that you're craving, as much as you're willing to do that, put that same amount of follow through into this idea of loving other people and see what happens. So let's recap what we've covered so far today. So far, we've learned tragedies can be shared through empathy. Empathy and compassion are powerful forces, and that Jesus shows us that we are his disciple, and we're showing that more than ever when we love other people, that's how we prove it. And different people are harder to love, but authentic love is hard. And loving others, it's important we do it. It's important to Jesus, so it's important that we do that. We can't help but walk through a life circumstance with someone and see the difference that it makes. They're powerful forces. It's what we need right now in this world we live in more than ever before. And the more this happens, the more we're going to start seeing the things we're praying for be answered in prayer, because God wants to work through us. Our God isn't a God who sits in heaven, pushes buttons, waves magic wands, and just makes things happen and not happen. Our God is very patient. He's very loving. But all of us are his kids. He looks at all of us in the same way. And he wants us all to care about each other, to care for each other. That's where he gets his greatest joy, is when he sees us being his hands and his feet, making a difference in their lives. Now, to help illustrate this point in the best possible way, I've got a story that I'm going to read to us in here just a second. I've got some folks that are going to come in the room and they're going to join us while I'm setting this up. And this story is going to illustrate this point. You're going to get to watch it on the screen. I'm going to use my storytelling skills, whatever I might have, to their fullest here, and do my best to communicate this point. The Skipples were yellow, no doubt about that, from the points of their gill boots to the lights on their sill hats. But amazing Kralunkers, when it came down to that, they loved to help anyone stuck in a cravat. No matter how dark, how terrible the plight, the big yellow lamps on their sill hats burned bright, illuming the corners with yellow spotlights. They were born to do rescues and set things aright. But the Skipples were aloof. They often kept to themselves. They lived up on Mount Tilly. They slept on yellow shelves. They kept rescue equipment for whatever befell. They trained daily for rescues. They rang alarm bells. Now the Loams were world famous as huggers and reachers. At the foot of Mount Tilly, they lived and they played. Sure, the first thing you noticed when you saw those fine creatures was their red-colored bodies and red-colored features. The next thing you noticed, if you were standing quite close, was a cozy, tucked feeling, like warm buttered toast. It made everything warmer, but they wouldn't boast, for this gift put inside them inspired their utmost. The Loams all lived close, at the base of Mount Tilly. The Skipples were on the mountain, and the reason was silly. They each got along, although sometimes ill-willy. They lived close for years, but relations were chilly. Even so, that Grand Mount was an idyllic spot. Everyone was so thankful for the things that they'd got. Both the Skipples and Loams would agree on this spot that they were very most thankful for the Uplippin' Tots. The Blippentots were all cuddly and cute. When they grinned or they giggled, everyone awed and said, shoot. I love Blippentots. I just love watching them grow. I love their tiny red hands and their little wrinkly red toes. Mostly life on that mountain, it was exciting and fun. The loams played in the shade, the Skeeples warmed in the sun. They'd say all of their problems boiled down to just one. Blippentots tended to wander and run. See, Blippentots were young. They had lots to learn. To walk and to wander, their tiny hearts yearned. But often they'd tumble as tiny feet turned toward the cave of cravats, and some didn't return. I could tell 1,000 stories of the tots and their beauty. The most famous of all is that one right in the middle, right there. Tinket Cotton, that cutie. She shared, she sang, she was never ever snooty. She was all charm and all red from her head to her little booties. Like every Blippentot, she was made for a reason. A treasure we hold, but just for a season. To suggest the different would sound just like treason. And this is the thing that red and yellow both agrees in. So surprised were the loams that Tinket walked out, they mumbled, she's walking toward the cave. What's that all about? At first they just whispered, and then it turned to a shout, Tinket Cotton, come back! Please don't, look out! The loams fell behind, crying, please, Tinket, please, just come back! The little Tinket kept tottering her dangerous track. Then the Skeeples' bells rang, they loaded their packs. To the rescue, they called, and they ran down switchbacks. Gorp, lurked the cravat as little Tinket tumbled in and turned her bright glow of red to a black, gooky ruin. As quick as a wink, the glop grabbed her skin. I wish she'd never found the evil cave with the goo in. Then the two warmest loams darted into the cave, headed straight toward poor Tinket, more determined than brave. But it was so black and so dark, the situation was grave, and they both thunk a thought, can our Tinket be saved? They planned to pull Tinket all free from the harm by filling the cave with a loam special warm. Then the goo would get melty, release her red arms, they'd get her out of the pit, and they'd end the alarms. But the loams had a problem right from the start. No matter how warm their love poured from their hearts, they couldn't see Tinket. The cave was just too dark. The two loams were forced from the cave to depart. We need some more help, said a voice from the crowd, and a heavy dark silence came down like a cloud. They all knew who to call, but now, were they too proud? Why, the loams call the Skeeples? It's hardly allowed. The loams stood in silence outside the cravat. They looked at their feet, and some held their red hats. And then, uninvited, a krillunk rope went splat, and from over a rock appeared a bright yellow hat. Yes, the Skeeples came down from their Skeeply inclines, with their silk hats in place and all ready to shine. They took charge and set up some bright yellow tape lines. Finally, oh finally, things might finally work out fine. But some of the loams just weren't ready for this. Just where have you been? You're too late, they all hissed. And some Skeeples were ready to cease and desist. Until they thought about the child stuck inside the abyss. So the Skeeples kept working, although taken aback, setting up all the lights they would not be sidetracked. Just leave it to us, please. Take one step back. We'll get the child out. We've observed her whole track. The Skeeples all worked with their confidence sure. Their methods were proven and their motives were pure. All their lights lit the cave with no corner obscured. In that very dark cave they knew Tinket couldn't endure. Little Tinket was stuck, and that fact was plain. So the Skeeples mapped out the most deadly terrain. With the cave brightened up, they could see everything. We'll simply lift the child out, and success is attained. The rescue sounded so easy and quick, till they found that the goo was especially thick. The red loam child was caught in a cravat, dirty trick. One Skeeple came out looking solemn, sad, and sick. We've assessed our assessment, he announced to the crowd. But it looks rather grim, he said not too loud. We can see that she's caught. She's stuck even now, and we just can't get her loose. We just aren't sure how. Some loam's lips trembled. No one knew what to do. Then, through all the mumbled prayers, one voice sounded through. But, well, what if we try as one team instead of two? Let's all work together and get her out of that goo. No one's sure who shouted, but we can't do that. Then a Skeeple looked away and then pulled down his bright hat. It's just not tradition. And he turned and he spat. Mixed red and mixed yellow beside a cravat. Just then, Grandpa Loam spoke. Now that's about enough. I've heard red and I've heard yeller and all that old stuff. Now we're gonna save Tinky. Don't you give me no guff. So now who's on the team? Or do I have to get rough? And with that, Grandpa Loam marched his way right back in. Then the quiet got thick and pride started to thin. Everyone stood still watching till one Skeeple joined him. Why, he followed the loam, and by golly, he grinned. Red and yellow filled the cave, coming in 2 by 2. The task was too important not to try something new. The loams warmed their hearts, and their special heat grew, while the Skeeples lit up the cave like sunshine at noon. But red loams and yellow Skeeples, how could this be? Could this be the way Tinket might finally become free? The cravat slowly warmed, and the loams could now see it had taken an pitot to help them to agree. Then Grandpa stepped up. He took Tinket's red hand. The chief Skeeple stood by. And then, right on command, the two began to pull on her arms, and something wondrous began. Tinket's skin glowed orange, so bright and so grand. Then almost at once that dark cave changed its mood. Orange glow moved up Grandpa, and the Skeeples approved. The chief Skeeple glowed orange, and all the loams oohed. The cravat grew turned orange, and Tinket Potten, she actually moved. The orange Skeeple on one side and Grandpa on the other, they lifted Tinket out and they handed her to her mother. As the tiny one was hugged until she nearly was smothered, the orange glow spread to aunts, cousins, and even brothers. The cave filled with orange on that wondrous day. Then it covered Mount Tilly with bright orange rays. The cravat cave then brightened its other passageways, and more cravats were revealed, with tots trapped and afraid. The chief Skeeple then gave the order, Men, roll up your sleeves! And rescues began like you wouldn't believe. Just outside the cave's mouth, a party began to blossom, and at each tot was freed. Not a one went straight home. They danced and they sang under an orange loam dome. Had orange punch, orange cookies, and orange ice cream foam. Red and yellow high-fived and stopped being so rotten. They named that fine day the day of the freedom at Blipitotten. The Skeeples and loams were so glad they'd gotten the importance of orange. Just ask Tinket Potten. The end. That story is a great illustration of what happens when people begin to work together. But what does it take? It takes a tragedy, oftentimes, to pull us together. Think about how many times that you see something wondrous happen in a community, and it's usually right on the heels of something not so nice that happened. And believe me, none of us wish for horrible things to happen. But God always has a rescue plan in mind for us when life happens. Life is going to bring us negative circumstances. Life is going to bring us things that we did not want to happen to us. We never dreamed would happen to us. It happens to other people, not to us. We all tell ourselves. But it does. And when it does, we have to decide, what am I going to do now? And if you're one who's been through a hard time, you are even more equipped to be able to help someone who's going through something, because your empathy is going to be easier to pull on because you've been in their shoes before. I think back to the church that I grew up in, and I remembered committed moms and volunteers who were typically mostly moms who volunteered for the kids ministry, the church I went to. And there's certain ones that stand out that I remember to this day that made a connection with me. And oftentimes it was through a form of empathy, where as a little kid, I felt understood, I felt heard and listened to, and it made a difference. I remember Mrs. Kraft. Mrs. Kraft, I was in there on a Sunday morning. I was in second grade, and the way it worked was if you memorized a Bible verse, you got a candy bar that day. And they announced it weeks before. And they would even help you and kind of coach you through it. But I didn't take it seriously. I was like, I got all the time in the world. I'm not worried about that. And if you're like me, guess what happened? That Sunday morning comes and I realize this is the Sunday that you've got to say your verse if you want the candy bar. And I hadn't worked on it at all. I was not ready. So and my luck, every kid except me got it. Well, this teacher, Mrs. Kraft, she said, Matt, didn't you work on a verse? And I'm like, yeah. And so then I tried, but it was like miserable, not even close. And she's like, here, why don't you come with me? And I'm like, oh, great. She took me out of the class. She took me like over by the kitchen because it was kind of a chaotic area. There was somebody else doing something else in the kitchen. And it's like, okay, here we are. What? And she said, let me help you. There's a verse I want to help you with. You can learn it in 5 minutes. I'm like, what? And she's like, no, really, it's Philippians 2:14. Okay. Do all things without murmurings and disputings. This is back when they learned King James. Do all things without arguing, complaining. It's the NIV version. But she helped me do all things. Okay, repeat back. And in 5 minutes, she helped me to learn that verse that to this day I remember. All these years later, I remember that verse because she took some time and it imprinted me so much. And I felt so proud when we walked back into that room 5 minutes later and I said my verse and I got my candy bar. I was the happiest kid ever. She rescued me from a moment that could have been my worst day ever and changed it to my best day ever because she took some extra time and said, I'm going to do what I normally wouldn't do for everybody, but I'm going to do it for you today. And she did something incredible for me. I remember Mr. Smith. Oh, Mr. Smith. He worked at General Motors, like many people did back in those days. It's like 1 out of 3, right? He worked at General Motors, and this is for our 5th grade boys. And he was there consistently. Now, I don't remember anything spiritual that Mr. Smith imparted to me. And if he were still alive and if he were here, he would even say, yeah, because he even admitted to us, guys, I'm only here because my wife told me I had to be. He did to the rest of it. And we're like, okay, because nobody else would do it. And his wife was like, somebody's got to be into those kids. Get in there. And so he was there because nobody else was. He just needed to be there. He didn't have any spiritual knowledge to impart on us. He wasn't some great spiritual wizard, but he was there. And I'll never forget the Cedar Point trip he took us on. Because we were like, what? He's like, hey, why don't we go to Cedar Point? That'd be fun, huh? Let's plan it. Let's do it. And we're like, okay. And he ended up planning, organizing, and we all piled up. He had a pickup truck with a topper, and he fit 8 of us in the back of that pickup with the topper. I know, we got away with it back then. It's just not today. But no seatbelt in sight. There was a toolbox, and then if he stopped, it would, anyway. Didn't want that to happen. But we all rode to Cedar Point in the back of this guy's truck. And I remember that because I remember the time he took made an impact on me that I remember that man to this day because he showed love, he showed compassion by giving his time to us. He ended up being that teacher for like the whole year. He started off because he had to, but I think he secretly liked it towards the end because he stuck with it, even when he didn't have to. So notice that one person imprinted scripture, the other one just imprinted on my life in a positive way by spending time. At Silver Creek Church, we prioritize family ministry. You can walk through any church building and you can see where the money is and where the priorities for that church very quickly. Look at where the most square footage is allotted for the rooms and where the money is spent the most, what looks the nicest. You can usually figure it out. But if you walk through our environments here, you're going to see that we invest in our children. We invest in our teenagers because they are as important as the adults. There's no difference. And it's critical that we have a place for them. So it's a priority for us. All ages have a place here. We have middle school, high school, as you well know. We have a monthly budget for the kids and the teens to ensure that they have what they need. This is our age-defined plan. Birth through high school, we have a plan where we have like the teachings and the things that we learn. It's a cohesive plan, so it works one grade to the next, so our kids never feel like they're going from one environment to the next and it's just, whoa, this is too weird. We try to make it seamlessly flow all the way through birth through college. And that requires intentionality and effort on our parts, but it's one of our trademarks, I think, as our church. For a church of our size that's just planted and just started out, to already have the programming we have for kids is incredible. I'm so proud of the amazing volunteers that we have here and for the people that make a difference in that. Now, we also prioritize here relevant teaching for adults, and it's important to me to be accurate. I mean, you guys have no idea the time I spend making sure that what I'm teaching is 100% accurate with what Scripture teaches, because you can't just take one verse and teach that one verse based on how it hits you. You've got to look at the chapters before it and the chapters after it, get context for what was happening in the world at that time in history to be able to understand and put together, aha, this is what's going on. It takes time, it takes effort, but it's important. And so we make sure that for our church here. Now, for our Silver Creek Church, we exist to make Jesus Christ known. That's our purpose. The reason the church is here is we want to make Jesus famous, to say it another way. We want people to be like, man, these people keep doing things, and I feel like it's that contagious kind of like that cool love that you don't expect, but when you see it, you love it. It's the kind of stuff that gets shared and gets a million hits on the Facebook because people are like pulled in and drawn to amazing acts of kindness. And that's what Jesus is about. And I want our church to always keep that in our forefront. Our mission is to inspire people to follow Jesus Christ. It's very simple. It's not a difficult one to memorize. It's easy to know. Our mission is just to make sure that we are inspiring people all the time to follow Jesus Christ. We can't make people follow, but if we can inspire them through our actions, not just our words. Our words sound great, but it's our actions that people remember more than anything else. Love gets noticed in a world when it's undeserved or unexpected. That's the kind of love that stands out. We love it when people do that for us. We love that. To be on the receiving end, we all love that. And I think it's important that we also look for ways to share it with others as well. People lean in and pay attention when they see something out of the ordinary and out of the usual. Because it's usual to be nice to people that are nice to us. It's usual to show love to people that show love to us. But it's unusual to love someone and show kindness to a person that didn't show it to us first. That stands out in the world. That at the company picnic gets talked about in a good way with going, can you believe that he was really nice to that guy when you heard what he did? Oh, yeah. I can't believe he was nice to him. Yeah. And people again wondering, they're thinking inside, what makes him tick? What's the reason he's so nice? How did he do that? That's how Christ becomes known, because people begin, the curiosity leads to an interest. The interest leads to a conversation and says, hey, can I ask you a question? You were really nice. Why? And that's your opportunity to say, well, I'm not perfect, but I'm trying to be more and more like this person that I've begun following. And his name is Jesus Christ. And he's changed my life in an incredible way because as I've begun following him, I'm seeing a lot of things change around me for the better. It's not because God makes my life special or better, but it's because God helps me to get through things more than I could ever do on my own. And I don't know what I would do without him. That's what gets shared. That's what gets heard. And I think in this time in history, our world needs us, the church, to be outward focused and be outward in our generosity through our actions, as well as everything else that we have in life. So thank you so much for being with us today. That's all we have for today. I will like to say a word of prayer and then we'll close out our service. Heavenly Father, thank you for the opportunity to be here today, to gather together like we have. We're so fortunate. We forget sometimes how easy it is for us to just get in our car, come down the road, walk into this building, and we get to sit here and talk about you, learn about you, and take our life one step closer towards you. Help us, Father, to remember to share this with others. Help us this week to have the courage when someone asks us, hey, what is it that's different about you? Help us to have the courage, Father, to respond and to make you known. Help us with the words. Sometimes the words can be tricky. Help us with the words, Father. And help us to set reminders for ourselves to be intentional about our time spent with you, the time in preparation so that your compassion, your empathy can grow on the inside of us. We give you thanks for this incredible day, and we give you thanks, God, for your word and for revealing the truth to us. It's in Jesus' name we pray. Amen. Amen. So thank you so much, guys.